Welcome to the NPA. We're doing it. I'm Prim. I'm gonna be facilitating or whatnot. Other steering committee members are these people. Say hi.
And they them live on Maple Street.
I'm Jack. I live on St. Paul Street.
Jason, I live on Caroline Street.
I'm Fareed. I live on Ledgmere.
And yeah, here.
I think my speed
Online, yeah.
maybe not.
Yeah, online.
There's also Kat.
Okay. Kathy is not feeling well, but she's another member of the street.
They're on cameras, so I'm gonna pull that one right down.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, so we're gonna do some public forum for a bit. And then we're gonna have some presentations on overdose prevention centers, the school redistricting that's coming up, and Apartheid-Free communities campaign, and what's been going on with that in city council. So yeah, this is NPA. Basically, we're here to talk about stuff that's relevant to our neighborhood and be kind and decent to each other. And yeah, basically that's it. So we're gonna start public forum now. Just take a few minutes, be respectful of other people's times. We'll do this for like 15 minutes. So whoever wants to talk can.
And to be clear, anyone who wants to speak to one of the items on the agenda, there'll be plenty of opportunity to do that during each agenda item.
Hi, everybody. My name is Fareed. I'm a volunteer with the People's Kitchen Project. We bring food boxes to families here every week in the South Meadow area, and we also serve free meals downtown for dinner. And also we do community events such as the NPA. Coming up for Thanksgiving, we will be serving free meal downtown at 2 p.m. on Thursday to anybody who wants one. And we'll also be delivering a full complete meal to families that we serve. If you're interested in supporting us, we could use more cooks and more people taking on dishes that we can then assemble and deliver. We'll also, if you could procure like ingredients, if you have special connection for like supplies and serving things like that. And we also, cash donation always goes a long way in helping us meet our mission. We also are looking for sleeping bag and warm clothes and blankets for our unhoused neighbors. So if you have any of those you want to donate, you can drop it off at my house at 44 Ledgmere. You could also give me a call, 802-491-3491. Thank you very much. And happy Thanksgiving.
Reed, what's the Venmo for?
People's Kitchen VT. And if you want like a meal delivered for Thanksgiving, let me know too. Like we could do that.
Would anyone else like to share something? Check.
Hello. I'm Jack. Said that already. This is kind of off the cuff. I had this idea. I've been finding that when trying to do new things, the easiest way to do it is just to put a date on the calendar and tell people where you're going to be and then figure it out from there instead of trying to spend a whole lot of time figuring out how to plan to do something, to plan to do anything. And so this kind of comes out of a lot of work that I've been doing over the past couple of years around housing advocacy in Burlington, as a resident, as a renter, specifically around housing supply and building new homes that we need. This has become broadly my whole life in a way in terms of my professional work now, and all my volunteer time revolves around housing. I've been having conversations recently with other people. I've been thinking about this for a while. I think that what is kind of missing in a sense in Burlington around housing is a proliferation of small scale neighborhood developers. I think in Burlington, we kind of have And I think this is changing, but for a long time, we've had a broad kind of anti-developer sentiment. We felt that developers come in and extract value from neighborhoods. I think in a way that hasn't always actually been true, but I think the best way to not have that be true is to become developers ourselves. And I think it'd be really important and useful for us to put together people who have time, money, or land, or even none of the above, or all of the above, into some kind of neighborhood incremental development groups. There's kind of a wave across the US of people saying, I want to invest in my community and I want to do that directly with my backyard or with savings that I have or with my time or labor, and saying, here's how I want my neighborhood to change, and then figuring out how you're going to make it change yourself. I know it's really hard and expensive to figure out how to do this, but I think when you get enough people in a room together, it becomes a lot easier to figure out who has what resources and to split those things. And so this is me saying, I'm not sure if it makes sense. I think it's important for these to be like hyper local. So not like Burlington, but even like the South End, or like even like Five Sisters, which is kind of the edge of where I live. And that'd be kind of an interesting thing for this group. Like, do we think that there's enough interest for something like this at like a lakeside, or like a Five Sisters and a King Maple? Like, is it that small that like it would be helpful to have people thinking about that small of their neighborhood? Or is just like, Ward 5, like the South End, is that big enough? But this is me saying out into the world, I want to figure out how we take the first step towards figuring out what that looks like. If that's something that's interesting to you, come tap me on the shoulder after the meeting and I can get your name down. And when I do put something on the calendar and say, here's where we should get started, I'll email you. But anyway, that's just a thing that I think really needs to happen. It's something that I'm really excited about figuring out how to facilitate and be involved with. And I hope that some other people also think that that's an interesting thing. So thank you.
Anybody else?
You can really say anything. It's not like a city council. I mean, you can say anything there too, but
Are you kidding me?
Well, I'll say something. When I get done swallowing. My name is Andy Simon. I live on Locust Street. I seem to have by default become the voice of the Callahan Park Doing Group. This is a group of people from the NPA who got together last year and decided to sort of promote improvements in Callahan Park. And we did that. We actually applied for a Pennies for Parks grant and got benches that turned into tables. And so there's one thing about Callahan Park is that we need to move those benches / tables back to the shed so they don't become a feature in the sledding hill this winter. Which I think is almost inevitable if we leave them close to there. So at some point, we're going to need some person power to do that. One of the people in our group already told me she has a bad back, so she's out. Again, sort of along the lines of Jack, if you're interested in being contacted about this, please tell me and I'll just include you in our email list for doing that sometime in the next, between now and when the snow actually really does happen. Also, you may have noticed if you're anywhere around Callahan Park that there's a big expansion of the community garden in Callahan, which is sort of happening. You might have thought it was like a prison camp because it's got this giant fence now, and but it's actually an expansion of the community garden with a taller fence. So that's been an interesting feature in Callahan. The other thing is that there's a master plan that was arrived at kind of consensually over several months a few years ago. And one feature of that master plan is trying to make paths around the park that are accessible to people and are accessible to people also who may have some mobility problems. One piece of that is that the Parks and Rec has funding for now is a mobility path from the parking lot on sort of the Jason Van Dryke end of the park, you know, the kind of Caroline Street end of the park, over to where I live on further down Locust Street, that they're moving ahead with. Some of the people in my neighborhood kind of contacted me and said, I want to know more about this path before they start cutting down trees. So again, if you're interested in knowing more about what's happening with this path, it seems like we're going to have a little walk with Max Madalinsky from Burlington Parks and Rec soon
there a date?
to learn more about it.
Is
So
there a date for this?
There's no date yet.
Okay. Can you
But
please post to Front Porch Forum when there is?
I will post to Front Porch Forum, though of course on Front Porch Forum I can only post in the Five Sisters neighborhood, but maybe it'll be amplified. So again, if you're interested in that aspect of sort of developments in Callahan Park, also I'll note down your email and I can include you in that, but I will put it on Front Porch Forum as well. Thank you.
This is not about Ward 5. It's just really cool. I just wanted to make a plug for getting out of Burlington and going up in the mountains, because I always forget that this time of year and forget that it's already winter in the mountains. Yesterday, I drove up to App Gap and hiked south on the long trail to the top of Mad River Glen, and there was 16 inches of snow up there, and it was so awesome. So don't be fooled by the Burlington Banana Belt. Get out of town. Winter is here. That's my plug for Vermont. Winter isn't here, it's there. It's there, exactly. Winter's not here, winter's there. Although this morning when I was at the park walking the dog, it sure felt like that.
Yeah, if you want to use buy a mic somewhere so the people online can hear you.
Well, that makes me less inclined.
Oh, no, you're good. Just, yeah, just project.
Question. Hi, I'm Kate. Kate, I live on Scarf. And I just wondered if, Fareed, when you mentioned the People's Kitchen being in City Hall at Park, I just was wondering from your perspective and others who have been serving food there for a while, if you just are willing to share like how your take on how things are going, because I know there's like the news and then there's the going through town, but seeing state police stationed and kind of just, it's always looking different right now, like the scene and are people okay? And like, just if you could share your take on things from your experience.
Oh, no. Yeah, so I think the new chief has made it a point of like actually having the park be swept by officers like every 2 hours or even more frequently. And obvious drug use it was not been tolerated. So there's a lot less of the open kind of drug use that we used to see earlier this year. And at the same time, people are still living on the street, and now they're all getting really nervous about this winter. I know like the city is working with the state and like they're trying to increase available shelter space, but now it's almost the end of November, and I think so far we've seen like a 20 beds net gain in terms of shelter space, and I guess there's another 30 something beds facility that's coming online, but there is 300 people living on the street right now. It's gonna be ugly if we don't figure something out. So I'm just hoping that there's a better plan than, and I think like the 0 degrees threshold is really closely low. I think even like when it's 20 out, like people should not be sleeping out on the street. We're seeing like more people on wheelchairs now getting in line to get food, and sometimes parents would like with their kids while living in their cars would like swing by, and like we know like they have their kids in their cars. They should not be living out on the streets. I don't know what we can do about it, but hopefully our leaders will come up with something. But the cops have been great about respecting our like our distribution there. I think like there was a memo that the chief sent out saying what we are doing is protected under First Amendment and like to just leave us alone. And by and large, they've been doing that.
Just say it's irritating that he needed to say protected under First Amendment. Like, how about protected under basic human decency?
Yep.
You don't want to see like stuff like that downtown, like provide people with housing. It's like it's such like housing first. That's like people say that, but it makes so much sense. Like if you don't want crime downtown, give people housing.
Okay, so I think we're gonna wrap up public forum now and transition to conversation about the overdose prevention centers. And that is going to be led by Teresa. So yeah.
Teresa's actually not here.
Okay.
She is very sick.
Unfortunately.
Yes, I was coming with her, so I'm just gonna be solo.
Perfect.
Right here?
Yeah.
Okay. Is this chair with them?
Either one.
Okay.
Just park yourself near the mic.
All right. Hi, everyone. Yeah. Okay.
It doesn't help, but just needs to go.
Okay. So all set?
Yeah,
Okay.
go for it.
So I am Jess Kirby. I'm the Director of Client Services at Vermonters for Criminal Justice Reform. I'm not used to doing this solo. I usually do this with Teresa Vizina from the city of Burlington, and she, is like the start us off person. So I'm not used to playing that role. But I'm gonna, do my best to start us off and then go with it. Like I said, I'm the Director of Client Services at VCJR. We are the city's partner on overdose prevention centers and on helping to implement Vermont's first overdose prevention center in Burlington. We're really excited about that. And we've been going around to different NPA meetings to talk to people and just Burlington residents about where it's at right now and tell people, I don't know if you all probably saw it in your emails, but if not, you can find it on, I think, is the website called Civic Clerk. Teresa usually says that part too, but and on the city website under the OPC tab, there is a place where you can do a survey about overdose prevention centers, and it's just kind of part of our we want to have a really robust community engagement process where we get a lot of feedback from Burlington residents and community stakeholders and people with lived experience on what they think about the OPC and where it should be cited and what services should be there, and just make sure that we're really hearing concerns from people, hearing feedback from people. So already like 300 people have done it. We just found out, which we're really excited about. We want a lot more people to do it. It's for anyone who lives or works in Burlington or just like spends majority of their time there. We also want to make sure people know about that. It's live until December 15th. And so encourage people to do it if you can. And also encourage people on the city website as well. You can find a webinar that we did last week or maybe the week before with someone named Brandon Marshall, who is, a leading research expert on overdose prevention centers and has been researching that for 20 plus years. And he was part of the webinar. I was on there as a person with lived experience with opioid use disorder and someone who's experienced overdoses myself. And today, I work with a lot of people and have been for the past 10 years in harm reduction, working with a lot of people who are really at risk for overdose death and people that are experiencing a lot of overdoses and a lot of harms associated with their drug use. So, just kind of speaking from that perspective, Brandon was speaking from a research perspective. And then we had someone who is the OPC director of Project Web of Renew, which is in Rhode Island. So the United States is second overdose prevention center, and theirs is completely state sanctioned, so the first in the country to have that. And so they came and talked about like what services they have there and how well it's going and how many overdoses they've intervened on and what a great relationship they have with the neighborhood and the ways that it's benefited their neighborhood, and just kind of like speaking from the perspective of like, hey, we're someone that's doing this and this is what it's doing for our community and for the people that come to the center. So that was really cool. So you can still watch that. And that's on the city website under the OPC tab as well. So the main purpose of coming was to make sure that people knew about those two things and ways to give feedback. Those are things that are part of two small parts of a broader service assessment that we're doing with an organization called PIRE, and they are an organization that helps to conduct research basically and to conduct evaluations, and they'll be evaluating the OPC after it opens and before it opens, like now, being a part of helping the community be a part of that process and getting data and research about what the community wants and hearing from the community and helping us just have an organized way of doing that. So it's part of a much bigger process that's going to involve, like focus groups and forums and, the survey and, that webinar and just a lot of process for, the community to have feedback, because a lot of people have questions, a lot of people have concerns, a lot of people don't understand a lot of it well and just want to, have feedback in that process and learn more about it. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for that. And in these two things that I'm talking about tonight are kind of where we're at in that process right now. So we just wanted to encourage people to fill that out and give people an opportunity to ask questions about it while I'm here. So, Teresa would be here on the city's end. I'm here from the, provider end of, we'll be the ones implementing. So we're really excited.
Who you work for?
Vermonters for Criminal Justice Reform. Yeah. And we've been working on OPC for probably 10 years. Myself and my supervisor, Tom Dalton, with a lot of other people who care a lot about this and really want to see it become a reality for Burlington. So that's pretty much the spiel I want to tell you about those two avenues for giving feedback and kind of learning more about it that we have right now. But I also am more than happy to answer questions about like where it's at right now and where we are in the process, or what our hopes are for it if people have questions, if that's cool. Oh, sure. Shoot me.
So first of all, thanks for the work that you,
Yeah.
thanks for the work that you do. It sounds really important. So can you just say, first of all, where to find the survey again
Yep.
and the information?
Yep.
And then I was curious about the projected timeline, like when would we expect to be seeing this hopefully? And then third, there's only 2 other OPCs in the country right now. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. So there are, over 30 in the world. And there's been, OPCs being operated in other parts of the world for over 20 years. And there is a lot of really awesome research behind them and how effective they are, both in helping the communities where they are, but also in preventing overdose deaths. And that is, the main point of doing these. But the survey is on that civic clerk page on the city website. Oh, look, it looks like they have something pulled up. Yay. Yes, and on the city website, there's an OPC tab on the city website, and so it's under there too. And as far as timeline, we don't know exactly, because a lot of it's gonna have to do with siting. And so we don't know where it's gonna be. We are located on Bank Street right now, and we've been working with this population for a long time. We have over 350 clients, and we do harm reduction services every day. We very much believe in responsibly implementing in a way that is, being responsive to our neighbors, and, building really strong relationships with our clients that, we can work with them on things like, behaviors and being good neighbors and things like that too. And we've done that really well. But so it won't be on Bank Street. We don't have a big enough space, and it's just not gonna be there. And that's a big part of the service assessment that we're doing in the survey, and we're doing specific surveys for the population of focus. And we are, part of the service assessment is to decide things about location. And so we feel pretty strongly that it needs to be in walking distance of close to downtown and near the park and the hot spots of Overdose. And especially, because of this is where overdoses are happening a lot, but also because of all of the things that we also hope that it will impact, and which is, public drug use and discarded syringes and all of those sorts of things. And a lot of that is concentrated downtown. So we feel like it really needs to be in the downtown area. We're gonna, see what all of this research we're doing says. But we also, a lot of people like have concerns about it being on Church Street or something like that. And we wouldn't want it to be on Church Street either. And that's not where our participants would want it to be, but we just want it to be somewhere that's on a bus line, but that's also like within walking distance of, close to the downtown core area. So, yeah, go ahead. Hi.
I'm imagining that there are people who might watch this on, on CCTV who don't even know what goes on.
Yeah.
In an overdose clinic.
Sure.
In its most basic form, could you explain that briefly to people? Definitely. And why are there only 2 of them in the United States of America?
Yep. Sure. First, I'll tell you a little about, yes, I'm glad that you brought that up because I forget, I live so much in this world that I forget that not everybody might know exactly what an OPC is. So, it stands for Overdose Prevention Center. In the past, there's been different language around it. It's been called a safe injection site, and that, morphed into safe consumption site because it's not just about injecting drugs. People use drugs in other ways. And then it kind of has moved into Overdose Prevention Center. I think just a lot to do with, language and not being stigmatizing, and also just encompassing that it's about overdose prevention in general, not just about people safely, people using drugs in a way that helps protect them from overdose. So that's where, Overdose Prevention Center term has gone. And we really like that term a lot better. But, so the idea for us is that we don't want it to be like, this is the Overdose Prevention Center. This is where every person that comes here is coming here to consume drugs. It's really for us like a harm reduction hub that's about, people who need resources can come, people who need buprenorphine treatment can come, people who need low barrier healthcare can come. We already have a low barrier medical partnership with the Johnson Health Center, and they do, we do it really like making it easy for people. Barriers equals people not getting the services that they need, and people are up against a lot. They have a lot of competing needs. Sometimes they're in withdrawal, they have not eaten, they have been up for 3 days, they are worried about their stuff that they left at the tent and who's gonna get into it. There are so many things that impact people that we really need to make things like healthcare and overdose prevention as easy to access as possible. So it could be counseling, it could be case management, it could be I need a ride to the methadone clinic, it could be I really want to go to treatment but I don't have a phone to call and I keep missing the call back, it could be I want to go to treatment and I don't have a ride to it, like all of these types of things we're going to help people with at the OPC. And so people can get connection with all that stuff, including medical care. It could be that they need an antibiotic for a wound that they have that's not healing, and they've had bad, past experiences with healthcare, or there's too many barriers. They don't want to go to the ER for 7 hours. Like, I think we can all relate to that, so when people come, it doesn't mean that people are coming there to consume drugs. It means that, they're coming there to access something that we have. There's going to be snacks, food, people to connect with, people all the time with what we do now. They come in and they just talk to us about what's going on. We need people to have like connection and people that they trust. And, a lot of people, there are people that don't understand the link between like harm reduction and recovery and treatment. There's a really, really strong link. You know, like I was a person that used a syringe exchange. I started using drugs when I was 13. I you know, got really serious for me really quick, and I experienced a lot of harm related to my drug use, and had to wait a long time for treatment, and had struggles you know, because of barriers to treatment. And so, you know, but the place that I did go was, you know, a syringe service program, and that's the place where I, you know, built trust with staff there. And when I, you know, one day had actually a particularly bad overdose, and was really scared and really upset and didn't want it to happen again, and really traumatized, and was by myself and didn't feel like I had anybody to like understand what I just went through, and like that I almost died, and I had an infection, and I had been waiting on the list for treatment for a long time. And the place that I went, you know, was to the Stern Service program. And I actually went and talked to who's my supervisor now, Tom Dalton, but he's the executive director at Vermont for Criminal Justice Reform. But he was the one person that was in my corner that I knew he would not judge me, and he would just be there for me. And I didn't even know what I wanted from him, but I just trusted him and just needed somebody. And I went, you know, and he, you know, didn't push me or force me at all. And that's exactly what we do now. We're just there for what you need, and wherever you're at. And that changes a lot day by day. You know, today it might be the wound, tomorrow it might be I want to go to Valley Vista, you know, and the next day, you know, it might be I'm not ready for that anymore. I just really need a snack and a clean pair of socks, you know, and that's what we do. But that's how you build that trust in those relationships. And, you know, that day when I went to him, he you know, get me to the hospital. I got treatment for the infection that I had, and he helped me call the clinic for like the 50th time. And they actually said that, you know, they had been trying to get a hold of me, and that I could start treatment, you know. And it just felt like it was like for me, you know, like if I hadn't come here, if I hadn't known him, if I hadn't built this relationship, you know, he hadn't been helping me stay on the list, you know, because I wouldn't have been able to stay on it by myself because I didn't have a phone, and things were chaotic, and, you know, all these things. And I maybe wouldn't have ended up in treatment right then, and maybe I wouldn't be here today, you know? So harm reduction is really important in recovery, and I did end up, you know, getting into treatment, and I had, you know, some bumps along the way, and they were there for me through that. And, but I just kept having people to come back to, you know, that I knew just cared about me. If you make it just all about people's substance use, it doesn't work. It can't just be like, when are we stopping using? When are we going to treatment? It just has to be like, how are you? You know, do you need a clean pair of socks? Do you need this? And you know what? Yeah, we bring up treatment to people. It doesn't mean that you can not ever talk to people about it. We do. People come in crying, I can't do this anymore. I'm cold. I, you know, have been my stuff stolen, you know, this, that, and the other. You know, I say like, you know, do you want to give treatment a try again? Do you want to call Valley Vista? I know you've been before. I know it's not perfect, but you know, like, we'll give you a ride. We'll call with you. We'll help you go. We'll help you get in the clinic from there. You know, like all you can do is, you know, be there for people and continue to try again. You know, I went to treatment a lot of times before I actually got into recovery. You know, I'm glad that people continued to give me those chances, you know, so, but I just want to make sure I finish on that one point is it's going to be a lot of services, not just overdose prevention, but people will be able to come there with drugs that they have, you know, purchased or, you know, obtained before they come to the site. That there will be people that are really highly trained, and that can respond to overdose. And, you know, it is something that people are responding to every day in our community. We have the tools to do it. We'll be trained really well. Even though, I mean, I responded to 2 overdoses in the past 2 weeks that were really serious that involved, you know, CPR and, you know, being on the pavement in the pouring rain by myself, you know, waiting for somebody to come, you know, for 911 to come. And that's traumatizing for staff too, you know, that have to do that. It's people that you really care about. What'd you say?
I just went to court, and I just got punched a few days ago. I just finished my bottle of Gabapentin. I just called my doctor at Riverside because I got my last violation. I used to live at Handy's. So I was an alcoholic and smoking cigarettes. I got my last violation at 7th place. If I get another one, I'm out. So I just went to court because of another tenant who got kicked out because he burglarized me and he was doing needles, and I lived at Handy's 184 Church Street where they had to condemn the building. I got punched before by that person who got over 500, 5,000 times when he was arrested, that guy with the Great Dane, and John Murad had said something about him, and then he got penalized. You didn't mention illegal predicting and that all the humans have it, and that's proof. And whether you want me to go accuse humans or not, without that being mentioned, then there's no way to solve it and even help other people.
Yeah, thanks. Just that, I was just gonna say that, so people will be able to respond in the event of an overdose, so there are small stations that people can use. All the sterile supplies that people need, there's medical care, there's trained staff, and people can intervene in the event of an overdose. But a lot of things will go on there, and guaranteed most people that come in there every day will not even be using consumption services, so, but does that help with the understanding? Oh, thank you.
I just wanted to say two things. One, to acknowledge that one of the founders of Vermonters for Criminal Justice Reform is one of your predecessors, Susie Wizawati, who was a state rep for this area some years ago, and that was a huge passion of hers, and it's really nice to see it continuing. When Susie first ran for state rep, it was right when my wife and I had moved to Burlington in 2008. And we moved from my job. Susan didn't have a job yet. Susie saw that Susan appeared to be a competent human being and said, "Will you be my campaign manager?" Grabbed her, and not knowing anything, Susan, patched together some Excel spreadsheets of names and helped run her campaign. And she doesn't live in Ward 5 anymore. She lives at Wake Robin, but she's just an amazing human being, and really nice to see the fruits of her work.
Thank you.
And then the other thing I wanted to ask that you've already answered, but I just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate that you did, is I was going to ask what helped you.
Yeah.
And you answered that already.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say thank you for that. And it's really powerful to hear about your path to where you're at now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So much. Wow.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of this.
Yeah, thanks. And people, I can always reach out to me or us. My name is Jess Kirby. VCJR website has all of our phone numbers and emails and stuff, and we're always happy to talk to people if people want to talk more in depth or have questions. And please do the survey if you can. We appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. What a nice crowd. This one's actually really nice. Smiles all around. I appreciate it.
The lead on all the presentations.
That's right.
Yeah, you did great. Oh, cool. Well, Tiff Bloomley is now going to talk about school redistricting stuff.
Well, there are three of us that are going to talk about school redistricting. Bram, Kupner, my seatmate, and Lucia Campriello, who is our district's representative on the Burlington School Board. And
if y'all don't mind, pull the mics a little closer.
I'm sorry. Yeah. And I want to share my screen. If I can. I should be able to. Okie doke. Let me see. Okay. Where's my? No, sorry. I apologize. It's asking me something that I've never been asked before. And I don't know. You know what I'm going to do? Can I? Email it to me as well. That is exactly what I'm going to do to you. And Bram is going to start us off. And the slides at the very beginning are not that critical. So sorry about that.
I've got them right here. I can email them. I think.
I can type it down.
I can do that. Sorry. So I'll just say, today, the task force on redistricting, which was kind of the big chunk of work that was mandated in Act 73 that passed in June, just met to finalize and approve a report to the legislature that will be come to us on the 1st of December. So this is really hot off the press. And do you have, Barbara, did you get it?
Waiting for the internet to make it come through.
Oh, okay. Really.
It's somewhere.
So
Right about one.
I think you should just start us off because I think, and Barbara, I'll just let you know when it comes up, how you can catch up.
Bang, there we are.
And then go to the next slide.
Go next slide. So, yes, Vermont's Education Transformation Act 73, which was spurred mostly by high property taxes. However, the effort to address high property taxes led to a larger and larger educational transformation project, and now encompasses pretty much every aspect of how we run schools and how we pay for schools. But the property taxes were a symptom of the fact that we had the highest per pupil spending in the country, and the fact that lo these many decades after Act 60 and efforts to ensure substantially equal educational opportunity, which is what our Constitution requires for the state of Vermont and per Supreme Court interpretation, inequality in our schools, in our educational outcomes, was as bad or worse than it was after decades of trying. So high property taxes, lots of spending, unequal educational opportunity, and this all happening in the context of the fact that over the last 40 years or so, Vermont's student population has gone from 120,000 to 80,000. So 33% decline in students, 40,000 students fewer than we used to have, but we're spending more. And average school size of roughly 400. That's the equivalent of 100 schools completely emptied out, and yet no schools have been completely emptied out. Right? So those were the problems that the governor and his team proposed early on in the session, a large and sweeping transformation, which the legislature took up and went to work on. And it had a few basic goals and a few basic ideas. Well, they're the goals. And lower costs, I would say everyone who was pushing this plan backed off pretty quickly from saying this is going to lower costs. This is going to lower property taxes. They all started hedging. Well, we're going to try to bend the cost curve. We're going to try to stabilize things. We're going to reduce the increases. So I think faced with the reality, people realized that this plan was not going to lower anyone's property taxes particularly. The notion was that we would go from, in our small state, from 115 school districts down to a much smaller number. The governor said 5. And, there's some thought about the optimum size for a school district, number of students and so forth. So, everyone sort of figured it'll land somewhere between 5 and 20, but it won't be 110 anymore. And, there was also somewhat to my surprise anyway, it turns out there's a certain amount of evidence that below a certain size, class size, education suffers. We all think, oh, small class sizes are awesome. There's all that individual one-on-one attention and all this. But, we had teachers come to the legislature and say, got 6 students in my class. If I have an activity that calls for 4 groups, I can't do that. And by the way, these same 6 kids have been in school together for the last 5 years. And so they're not getting the dynamic interaction, class conversations, and different points of view and all those things that larger classes can provide. And I think there's also too big, obviously. From my own youth, I know that 35 kids in the classroom is way too many. But somewhere between 6 and 35, there's an optimum number, and that optimum number changes depending on the age of the kids, from elementary school to middle school to high school, and so forth. So
You just talked about that.
Yeah.
So we can go on to the next slide.
So the legislature went to work, and there are many people who have been working on this for decades, and a lot of people worked really hard and did a nice job of staying focused on the students. However, education transformation, one of the goals was to reduce the property tax burden. So there was also, how do we fix the funding mechanism? And can we do that at the same time we do more to equalize the educational opportunities for students across the state? And the way we currently do and have done for a long time education funding in Vermont is unique in all the world. The fact that we have all these little towns that pass their school budgets however they want, and then they mail them all to Montpelier, and Montpelier writes a check for the whole thing, no questions asked. So yeah, it's a system that has evolved over a couple centuries, and if someone were designing it from scratch, they might not have done it that way. But there we were. So one of the large changes that Act 73 embodies is that instead of doing that, the state is going to distribute the same number of dollars per student to every district in the state. And there are adjustments to that number based on kids who cost more to educate. And so people who come into the school system with no or limited English, people whose education has been interrupted to some meaningful extent, people who come, students who come from low income households typically cost more to educate for, a lot of very complicated sociological reasons. But the basic notion is there's a certain amount per pupil times the number of students in your school district. That's your cash. And what that means is there's going to be a statewide statewide property tax rate. It is no longer going to be town by town and district by district, which I think in many small towns, it doesn't apply to Burlington since we don't have town meeting day, but at town meeting, the fight over the education budget was often the most acrimonious thing that came up year after year, and the thing that got neighbors yelling at each other. And so I personally think it is actually good. And, we heard principals and school boards and superintendents telling us, look, we have to do something, but the local school board, the local superintendent, we can't do it because it would tear our community apart. You guys in Montpelier have to do these things that are hard. Okay.
Just these.
Yes. So, one of the things that many Vermonters found irritating was that some parents chose to send their kids to private school, and our tax dollars followed those kids, sometimes to very expensive schools outside of Vermont and outside of the United States. So the legislature addressed that. No more Vermont tax dollars going to schools outside of the state, and for a private school to be able to accept a public school student and get those dollars, there are a number of criteria that have to be met. One of which is that there can't be a school in that district that offers the grade that that kid is in. So if you're in a district that only has K through 5, then you can go to a private school for middle school and high school. But if you're in a district like Burlington that has K through 12, public dollars will not follow a kid to school. It cut down the number of private schools that will be eligible from like 47 to 18 or something like that. And the last thing, I think the last thing for me to say, right?
I think you, yeah.
Okay. Is the effect on low and moderate income Vermonters. We have had in the past this very complicated system of property tax credits that come a year later based on last year's income and giving you credit against your taxes. That is being replaced with a system of homestead exemption. So again, it's income sensitized. Depending on your income, some part of the value of your home is exempt from property taxes. It goes from 95% exempt at, I don't remember exactly at what income level. And it fades out to a household income of $115,000. Above that, you are not eligible for the homestead exemption. So,
Graham, quick clarifying question. Does that apply, is that exemption for both school and municipal taxes or just for school taxes?
I believe it is just for school taxes.
And just education.
Yep. Thank you.
You can, so I'm just going to pick it up in terms of, I'm sorry, I sped up my partner here just because we were only given 25 minutes and I want to make sure that we have some time for some questions. So as I told you, like today, they met and it's been kind of hard to predict where they were going to go. I really respect the work that the task force on redistricting has done. I think that they have approached this very intelligently, and these were what they said were their guiding principles. They wanted to be pragmatic and they wanted to focus on what they could do within a 4-month period. They only had August through November to do this work. They needed to acknowledge political realities, one of which is the Agency of Education has been so stripped of its capacity that they have very little capacity to orchestrate mergers and redistricting, even data collection. They wanted to base it on data and research and not assumptions, honor local knowledge and local input, do no harm, and design for resilience, knowing that the state will undergo changes. And next slide, please. So much to the governor's chagrin, because the governor proposed 5 school districts in January of last year, they actually they did not redistrict the state. What they did is, and they didn't do that for several reasons here. So they could not find research that supports the size districts that were proposed in Act 73. And it's important for Bram and I to note, we voted against Act 73, not because we didn't think there needed to be changes, but we needed to support our school district and because there were arbitrary aspects of the bill. There are lots of examples nationally of efforts to consolidate that have failed. Maine, there was just a big article about Maine schools that were supposed to go from something like, 290 districts to 80. This was in 2007. And they're down, wow, to 264. There are 22 steps each district has to take in order to unmerge. But that is where they are headed. And so there are example after example where district mergers that are not voluntary, that are mandated by the state, have not been successful. New district maps do not do anything much, they determine, to address cost drivers, because the major cost drivers in education, the rise in education spending is health insurance, special ed costs, transportation, building maintenance, and construction costs, none of which are addressed by just merging school districts. And research suggests that locally driven voluntary mergers are going to be most successful and can produce even more immediate savings. On the next slide, this is just from the report, and I have a link to the report if you want to copy it at the end. Vermont really needed to concentrate on instructional improvement and regional shared service capacity, not on just large or rapid district mergers. Each district has its own set of books, its own policies and practices. To merge those is a major effort. And so instead, what they did is really kind of pushed forward three different ideas. One, creating cooperative education service areas. Now, you may know them. In other states, they're known as BOCES. I can't remember what that stands for. Something, but it's like cooperative education regions where you can reduce some duplication, you can leverage resources and promote equitable access to different resources within a region and thus reduce costs and incentivize strategic voluntary mergers through construction money and through technical assistance, and then work towards regionally governed high schools. There are a number of places in the state where there are multiple high schools within, miles of one another, where the student enrollment is going down, and it makes sense to contemplate a regional approach to high school education. So, thank you. So there's a timeline for this. This is an iterative process that they are articulating. It will take probably 10 years over time for the fruits of the work to be clear. But so in the first year, there's assessment and planning. So these big districts, they're like 5 different cooperative education, whatever they're called, the shared, the BOCES. Oh, all right, the districts. I stumble over that every time. Really, these areas need to start looking. Where are there? And there are incentives, built-in incentives for construction or for transportation agreements between different school districts. At any rate, people are going to have to look around and say, how can we collaborate? Do we really need this at every single school, or do we want to pool our resources and have 5 full-time instead of 10 part-time people doing this work? So we would launch some service pilots and begin regional staffing where possible. Then they would, and throughout, there's evaluation. Now that, I think, would be the responsibility of the Agency of Education, which I don't think has the capacity right now to do that. And that's going to be one of the things we're going to discuss in the coming session. I think that there will then be, over this time, in years 2 through 4 and beyond, talks about closing schools, talks about regional high school creation. Those will take place as as relationships develop across a region, which, I think I'm not even looking at my own notes here. I think okay, I gotta shut up. There's parallel work going on. You can go to the next slide. And you don't need to know about that right now because it's really in process and we're not going to know very much, but it relates to how do we solve the problem of transportation? How do we, you have your hand up. Okay, I should be quiet.
No, I just have a question.
Oh, okay.
Which is when the commission came out with its report that basically said, no, we're not going to recommend that school districts be consolidated down to 4 giant districts. The governor was clearly angry. And he said something to the effect of, well, fine, if you're not going to do it, I'll appoint a different commission that will. Does he have the power to do that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how he would. I haven't spoken with anybody that can really clarify that for me yet. I mean, the governor has a lot of power, but it is, I am hopeful that maybe his reaction was an initial reaction and that in time, there will be people around him who, and especially there will be superintendents and people in the education world who will help him understand that we are going to avoid a lot. I mean, I think that this brings, it has the potential to lead us to change, but change that is organic and that has some, that has buy-in. So at any rate, I don't, but I mean, the commission report has already been voted on. It's 11-member task force and they've voted on it. We're going to get the report on the 1st. You can't create a whole new, I mean, I suppose he could have his own task force working between now and when the session begins to offer an alternative proposal. But you can't undo the work of the
force.
you can't undo the work of the task force. Now, what I want to do is let Lucia talk a little bit about, okay, what does that mean for Vermont, for Burlington? Like,
I do want to just mention, we had on the agenda to end this at 7:55, so we'll go to like 8:05.
I can be very brief.
Cool.
The first thing I'll say is that regardless of our politics, we should all be very concerned that a leader would declare that they would mandate something that is moving in an opposite direction of the task force's delivered report. That should be deeply concerning to people, just as a note. It is deeply concerning to me. Not as a commissioner, as a human being in the world. Okay, popping on the commissioner hat very briefly. First of all, thank you to so much and to all of your colleagues and especially to the task force, but for you all for helping to communicate and decipher and distill exactly what's happening because it has been so fast evolving for these many months and it's incredibly complex work. And I know that you're headed into another incredibly complex session. So thank you for that. The thing that I can say very succinctly is that from the start, the Burlington school commissioners and your school board have been opposed to Act 73 for 3 very simple reasons. Which were illustrated by the primary goals within this deck. And that was that there was no data to support that this policy would in fact save money, would in fact produce operational efficiencies, or most importantly, would improve student outcomes. No data on those 3 primary goals. And so as an elected official, it would be very difficult for me to sit here and answer any specific questions that you had as to how I could support something like this, unable to point to any data that in fact affirm those things. So our consistent, again, the school board's consistent message has been, this is not a policy that is going, this policy as written is not going to achieve its primary goals, and therefore we cannot support it. That said, I agree that this redistricting task force has come up with an incredibly elegant potential solution, particularly with the incentives that are wrapped around it. And I have to dial deeply into the current report, that would support from the ground up the people doing the work, the experts in the field, support their collaboration and their voluntary collaboration. So there is some promising potential in that. As a school board, we have not convened since this new information came forward to be able to say even examples of what that could look like. However, I think that when you empower people in a voluntary structure and create financial incentives, you unlock incredibly creative thinking. So I'm optimistic that that work will progress nicely. And as for the funding component of things, I would just reflect back, because we will be in budget season soon, and I'll probably be with you again talking about that topic near term. You might recall that while last year Burlington School District's budget increased, the tax impact actually decreased by 4%. And that's because of the funding formula that Bram referenced has potential to change, but also has potential to retain its values in ensuring that students that cost more to educate, including just, by the way, high schoolers, right, versus younger children, et cetera, that because our district is deeply diverse in its makeup, which I believe is a huge attribute for us in Burlington, we do receive slightly more funding per pupil than others. And so that pupil weighting that exists today will continue to fund the Burlington School District until this new funding mechanism is put into place. And that's, as your representative said, several years out. So we are not expecting an impact, a financial impact of this work for several years in Burlington. The last thing I'll note, just to wrap up, because again, we're in budget season, is the other kind of really important piece to consider in all of this is that there are so many cyclical elements of running a school district that have continued to move forward for all districts across the state, like contracting, which are 3-year contract cycles. Like when you talk about the complexities of like just pushing it all together, it's like quite comical to imagine that ever being feasibly possible without extraordinary disruption to the human lives involved in operating a school district, in educating our children, and most importantly, the like harm that our children and families would suffer from that level of chaos. I'm on a soapbox. I'm going to sit back down, wrap it up.
So well said. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess if you have questions,
You know who to get in
you know
touch
who
with?
to talk to. And we're gonna move on to the next item on our meeting, which will be presented by Tristan. And it's about the Apartheid-Free Communities campaign.
Yeah.
Great.
Do we have a slide deck?
Slide deck. Send that what was left.
I guess we could be over.
And then we'll,
Okay.
Amy, did you send a slide deck to someone?
To Jeff.
Okay. Will you send it to Barbara?
yes.
Okay,
We'll
get there. Thanks.
Okay, cool.
It's true.
Like this was, yeah, no, I just, I don't know. Thank you. I think you signed in.
While that's getting opened, I'll pass these around too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joymin King. I'm a resident of Ward 4. First off, thank you so much for letting us be here to share a little bit of your precious NPA time to talk to you about something that we've been working on, that Burlington residents have been working on. I've learned a lot already just being here tonight as a teacher. Hearing about the redistricting conversation is very enlightening. And so we wanted to, we're here tonight because thousands of Burlingtonians have petitioned for 2 years in a row to put a non-binding advisory question on the town meeting day ballot. And those petition signatures have exceeded the 5% that is required by the Burlington City Charter to put this kind of non-binding advisory question on the ballot. But both years, that has been voted down by Burlington City councilors. And in this third year, there is an effort by our organization that we're here to represent, the Vermont Coalition for Palestinian Liberation. There was an open letter addressed to city councilors asking them to stop obstructing this and to let this non-binding advisory question go on the ballot. And the non-binding advisory question is putting forward something called the Apartheid-Free Community Pledge.
And if you want to click down a couple, then maybe we can do you want to just jump to this kind of part of it?
Maybe can we just walk through the
Sure.
Yeah, because I don't want to
Yeah.
confuse folks. But the pledge is asking the city of Burlington to take a stance against the crime of apartheid that is being committed by the state of Israel, and to end all support to that regime of apartheid. And so we're just going to take a little bit of time today to present very basic facts about the context of Israeli apartheid. We're going to share about what our local campaign has looked like and what we are suggesting as next steps for this NPA to take to move forward in this campaign. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about apartheid, this is a word that comes out of the Afrikaans word for apartness, right? That comes out of the South African context, apartheid in South Africa. But it has since expanded to become enshrined in international law in the Rome Statute of 1998 and later updated again, I think in early 2000s. And this is a strictly defined legal concept that has three main elements. It involves an intent to maintain domination by one racial group over another. We know it's apartheid when it is occurring in a context of systematic oppression by one racial group over another. And we know it's apartheid when this is being enacted through inhumane acts. So again, this is a strictly defined legal concept that numerous human rights organizations like the United Nations have compiled evidence to document as being committed by the state of Israel. So one such organization is Amnesty International, and they have identified four main strategies that the state of Israel uses to commit apartheid. One is dispossession, which involves theft of land and seizing property, demolishing homes and forced evictions. It involves segregation, so physical and legal separations that keep Palestinians restricted to enclaves, fragmenting their territory and imposing military rule on large parts of the occupied West Bank. So no civil rights, no right to a fair trial, for instance. It also involves the strategy of deprivation, deliberately imposing conditions of poverty on Palestinians, for example, by denying building permits at a extremely much higher rate than for Jewish Israelis in the occupied West Bank. And then finally, the strategy of fragmentation, again, keeping Palestinians separate from each other. In South Africa, this was called Bantustans. Here in Palestine, we see territory being fragmented into pockets as a strategy to keep Palestinians separated from preventing them from being a cohesive society and a nation with a right to self-determination. So it's not just us who is saying that Israel is committing apartheid. Again, this is a strictly defined legal concept. And if you click through the next few buttons here, you'll see some of these reputable international human rights organizations, as well as organizations within Israel like B'Tselem and Yesh Din, who have documented extensive evidence that Israel is committing apartheid. Former President Jimmy Carter actually came out with a book that labeled what Israel is doing as apartheid because he found that that was a very specific and fact-based description of the human rights conditions in Palestine. And finally, the highest court in the world, the International Criminal Court, issued a ruling in 2024 based on this evidence that found Israel responsible for this crime. And so what does this all have to do with us here? I think there are a few more slides here, but for time, maybe if we can skip this one and let's focus on this one for a moment. Tonight, we've heard about so many pressing issues that are facing our local communities. So many of those issues come from maybe in many ways a lack of resources going to the right places. And obviously, our local city government is not sending our city dollars necessarily to Israel for the committing of apartheid, but our federal tax dollars are. And if you are to divide that up into population of Burlington, you can see that in just 1 year, according to the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, the military aid that is sent to Israel from Burlington taxpayers is amounting to almost $3 million, which is equivalent to many different sort of basic needs that could be being met here in Burlington. For example, 1,855 households could have 1 month of free rent to that's the equivalent amount there. And then you can zoom out to look at Vermont as a whole, and that number goes up to almost 30 million. So what our argument here is that this conversation is not happening enough at a higher level at the state and federal levels, and local democracy being so important to Vermont and Burlington and being the place where people are interacting with their government most immediately. This is a forum where that conversation should be allowed to happen. Next slide, please. So that brings us to sort of what our efforts are here. I'll turn it over to Amy.
Yes, and I'll have you tap through a couple, but so as you already mentioned, the Vermont Coalition for Palestine Liberation is a collaboration of organizations and volunteers just working for Free Palestine. I can go ahead. Joy also kind of already mentioned this, but Palestine is a local issue, you know, as we already mentioned about money, but also when we are enacting violence and hate on the fringes of our influence, it's always going to boomerang back to us as it did in 2023 when 3 Palestinian students were shot in our streets. Go ahead. So in 2022, the American Friends Service Committee, which is a Quaker organization, created this pledge, and it's been adopted by over 800 communities around the world. I won't read the whole pledge to you, but you can find it in the pamphlet. But I will point out that specifically it's talking about a commitment to equality for the Palestinian people and all people. It's opposing all forms of racism and discrimination and bigotry, and that it's pledging to join in the work of ending all support to Israel's apartheid regime, settler colonialism, and military occupation. Go ahead. So in Vermont, there are, I think, over 50 organizations now that have taken this pledge. And then in 2025 town meeting day, there was actually 5 towns where the voters decided that they wanted their town to adopt this pledge. And it was actually put towards the voters in 9 towns. So while support for the pledge is going around Vermont, go ahead to the next one. But in Burlington, our votes being blocked. So for the 2024 town meeting day and the 2025 town meeting day, as Joy had mentioned, there's this power that we have through our charter where we can ask an advisory question, which is fancy lingo for a temperature check or poll. And so it's a way of asking people what they think. And leadership, city leadership doesn't have like a legal obligation to act on it, but they sort of have a moral one. So it's that check and balance. Maybe people remember questions about the F-35s or the Iraq War. So just like that. And so part of the charter says that you have to get a certain amount of signatures from voters to prove that Burlingtonians want to have this dialogue with their neighbors and be able to put it on the ballot. And so twice in a row, the coalition went through all the work, which I know people in this room who know what that's like to be out in the cold and talking to your neighbors and getting those signatures. And when it came time to sort of put the stamp on it and then, you know, send it off to the ballot, the Democrats on the city council said no. Go ahead to the next one. Meanwhile, beyond Burlington, there's some really exciting things happening. Like this is just a few that we fit on the slide, but there's more. So like Burnaby, Canada, Somerville, they just passed a whole ballot question about boycott and divestment. Iowa City passed a resolution about boycott and divestment. St. Louis passed a resolution to divest city pensions for war and human rights violations by Israel. So there's you know, we're not on the bleeding edge in this case at all. Even, you know, in April of 2025, the city council unanimously passed a resolution to protect free speech around Palestine. So it's really time that we rectify the fact that our free speech around this topic has been repeatedly denied. This is just what it looks like. What we are putting forward is we've already proven twice that enough Burlingtonians want this on the ballot. So this time we're just doing an open letter. You can put your name on it publicly and it will be going to the city council and saying, please stop blocking this. Go ahead. The last thing. So what can you do? You can sign the open letter. It looks like this, or you can find it online. You can also contact your city councilor. So I have Ben, Councilor Travers, and Councilor Singh's information up there, but please reach out and talk to them about their positions on this. You can also inform on Front Porch Forum, volunteer. Exactly. And I also wanted to highlight there's another campaign going on called No Appetite for Apartheid. And then the last thing is one of the powers that NPAs have is as a body, you can actually vote on a resolution and then it gets sent to city council and you're like, this is what Ward 5 thinks. So one of the things that we've done and offered NPAs as we've sort of been doing a tour is a potential draft language of a resolution that if you wanted to, you could vote on an NPA as an NPA, just saying like, we support this open letter and we demand the city council uphold the democratic norms and put it on the ballot. So that could be something that you could choose to do, probably not tonight since you're running out of time, but if you wanted us to come back or you wanted to vote on it at your next meeting, like that would be cool. I think that's everything. Thank you so much for having us. And if there's, we're at 8:20, so, but if you have other questions, you know where to find us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure, really quick.
Really quick. Can you just say a word about why it matters whether we vote for apartheid-free communities in Burlington?
Well, I'll just stress that we just want it on the ballot, right? People can vote no. And I think it's important as a local democracy to, when thousands of your residents and your voters have said for 2 years in a row that they want this on a ballot, that it should go on the ballot as a matter of principle. And from our perspective, and from what we've heard from canvassing on the streets and petitioning, people don't want to be complicit in the crime of apartheid and now genocide. People are seeing their neighbors suffering on the streets and schools being under-resourced and knowing that their tax dollars are going to bomb and kill whole neighborhoods and innocent children. That's an affront to people's conscience. And it's time that the city allow those people to express their moral voice on this and advise, which that's what the non-binding advisory question is supposed to do, to advise the city council that this is something that Burlingtonians care about and want to see their city government do something about and want to see their values reflected in our city government.
Sure, but yeah.
Or I can take it
Here.
over.
You can just.
Try to be, just try to be succinct, Ben.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
I have the same shoes. Wow. Look at that. So because this called out the Democratic city councilors and city councilors in particular, I wanted to take an opportunity to speak on the item here. First of all, let me say that I really respect the amount of work that Amy and Joy and Paul and others have put into this. I agree that it's no easy feat, and I think that you've brought an important dialogue forward on this issue, and I really respect, again, all the work that has gone into it. I do think it's important, though, for me to explain why I have voted against doing this twice before. And I think it's also important for me to say out loud
that as president of the city council, I have the power to set agendas for the city council. And this is the third time now that the same exact issue with the same exact wording is being brought forward. And I do want to say out loud now that as president of the city council, I have no intention to put this on any agenda. If other councilors want to amend it on, they can, but I don't plan on bringing it forward. And if I could, I'd just like to take a moment again to explain further why. To be clear at the outset, I firmly believe all Palestinians and Israelis alike are entitled to live in safety with dignity, freedom, equality, self-determination, and the opportunity to thrive. I also acknowledge the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a very complex issue with many differing viewpoints, particularly after the October 7, 2023 terrorist attacks and the ensuing war in Gaza. Conversations around this issue have become more difficult, and at times even discriminatory and violent. Civil discourse is especially made difficult when discussions are framed by leading questions rather than neutral questions designed to prompt neutral dialogue. When deciding whether to place a question on our town meeting day ballot, my minimum standard is that members of our community must be able to discuss it openly and safely without fear of retaliation. That standard is not met here. Over the past 2 years, a majority of the city council has declined to place this question on the ballot. For some councilors, including myself, this decision has been motivated by a desire to protect our ballot and our community from unnecessary divisiveness. For others, the priority has been to focus our local government's efforts on local issues rather than international affairs. Whatever our reasons, though, the responses we've received have too often been severe. In the past, when I declined to place this question on the ballot, I received an anonymous phone call asking, "How much did the Jews pay for your vote?" Another caller wished that my family and I burn in hell. A third threatened that I was being watched wherever I went. Many emails, hundreds of emails, accused me and my colleagues of being racist, pro-genocide, and baby killers. I received a vile anti-Semitic letter in my mailbox, which my wife and I were fortunately able to retrieve before my Jewish children came home from school. Once, in a city council meeting, when I asked rhetorically, or what I thought was rhetorically, whether if someone displayed a vote no sign in their yard on this question, would they have it torn out of their lawn? Would they be threatened? I say I thought it was rhetorical because I heard from the audience a response. Yes, and yes. Are they too going to be asked, how much did the Jews pay you to put this sign in your yard? That level of reprisal and retribution is the antithesis of the free speech that is apparently driving this movement now. I want to say that I know many of the individuals advocating for this ballot question. I've had very nice meetings with Joy and Paul and others. And when I speak to that kind of behavior, I am not speaking to any of them. In fact, I really do respect their commitment to their effort, and I trust they condemn the behavior that I just mentioned as much as I do. And I do not believe that the proposed ballot language itself is anti-Semitic. I also recognize Palestinian activists have been faced with their own harassment and, in some high-profile cases, unacceptable and unjust scrutiny from federal immigration authorities. Nonetheless, I can't in good conscience deepen the fractures in our community by placing such a polarizing question on our local ballot. It's worth noting that despite bringing this proposal forward 3 times, there really hasn't, from my perspective, been much openness to the ballot questions organizers to work to craft language that would be less divisive or more consistent with Burlington's local responsibilities. As we see in this presentation, I believe that one of the reasons that's the case is that they view the current wording of this question as essential to, among other next steps, push Burlington toward disengaging or divesting from companies they associate with Israel. I see this pamphlet here, and what it says is that, among the principal organizations that may be asked to be boycotted or divested if this ballot question were to pass are Intel, HP, Dell, Microsoft, Cisco, Google, Amazon, and others. And I would also just like to say here that even if one viewed boycotting these corporations as a noble objective, the practical consequences for our city could be immense. Burlington depends on many of these companies for core services. I look around this room and the equipment used to run this meeting depends on some of those companies for the services of putting these meetings out to the public. And the ballot question and what may come from that would have little tangible influence on international policy, yet could inflict real harm on our residents, workers, and institutions. I do remain committed to fostering dialogue, empathy, and education around the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but I strongly feel our ballot is not the proper venue for that discussion. My duty as City Council President is to protect the integrity of our local democracy and the well-being of everyone who calls Burlington home. I appreciate you giving me the time to say this, and thank you for the discussion this evening.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Encouraged to continue having discussions. But yeah, okay, 2 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. As the other person mentioned here, I'd like to take a couple seconds. I really like to say, Ben shows tremendous strength here. I hope we can all join together and denounce as organizations, as people, all forms of hate, and including anti-Semitism from everybody here. I can sit here and have a discussion, about, that 20% of Israel's citizens are Arab and they vote and they take part in their democracy. I could talk about these barriers of people in Israel and why those barriers were built and the historical context of the Second Intifada and bombings of innocent children on buses, schools, elderly, nightclubs, and why those were built and that 90% of those terrorist attacks stopped. Why do we only talk about the Arab displacement from Israel and we don't talk about the Jewish displacement from Arab lands? This is part of the conversation. I have a lot of respect for my friend Andy Simon, and he said this is about a community conversation, and I want to have a community conversation. I look to many voices on this issue. I've spent my time listening to a lot of Arab voices. Sophia Khalifa, Mossad Hassan, Luai al-Sharif. Luai al-Sharif has said, and I'm paraphrasing some of this, those who pose this as scholarly and do not spend time on debate, but yet focus their energy on the next step, is where our problems arise and where we separate ourselves as people. I give a warning to the West that do not fall into this trap, that this is a long journey of reconciliation and hopefully recognition. I believe we are taking that step without a debate, without a conversation. The fact that the same resolution has come 3 times tells me we have not had a conversation.
Okay, I think we're gonna end the meeting here because I said 2 minutes and it's been 3 minutes now. And we should keep having discussions, but we're 15 minutes over already.
Okay, and I would just say I support my colleague, President Travers, in his endeavor on this.
Great. That's the end of the meeting. Please keep having conversations and feel free to stick around, but we're gonna end the Zoom.
Also for the food if you want to take home.
Yeah. Thanks, Reed.